Welcome to Givers, Doers, and Thinkers. Today we talk to Professor John Cuddeback about the art of crafting a joyful, rich, and worthy life. Let's go. Givers, Doers, and Thinkers introduces listeners to the fascinating people and important ideas at the heart of American civil society. We speak with philanthropists, reformers, social entrepreneurs, nonprofit executives, religious leaders, scholars, journalists, and anyone else who will help us understand contemporary civil society's achievements and failures. My name is Jeremy Beer. Thank you for joining us. All right. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Givers, Doers, and Thinkers. We are recording on November 6th, 2023 from Phoenix, Arizona. At least I am. My guest today is not in Phoenix, Arizona. I believe he is in Front Royal, Virginia. And his name is John Cuddeback, professor of philosophy at Christendom College. But more importantly, for our purposes today, the founder of an enterprise called Lifecraft, through which John and others teach people how to fashion a vibrant life for themselves and their loved ones. John lives in Front Royal, Virginia, with his wife, Sophia, and one of their 6 children. Only one remains at home, he tells me. John received his PhD from the Catholic University of America and has taught various courses in philosophy at Christendom for 28 years. He writes often for both academic and non-academic publications and is the author of a book, a very good book, called True Friendship, Where Virtue Becomes Happiness. I get the feeling that most of his time outside the classroom is now devoted to operating and building Lifecraft, which grew out of John's popular blog, a blog that was called Bacon from Acorns. John Cuddeback, welcome.
Jeremy, great to be with you.
Did I get most of that right?
You sure did.
All right, good. We don't start with errata. We can move right on to our conversation. That's always a plus. We'll start here. What is the problem you founded Lifecraft to solve?
That's a very good philosophical question. I like it very much. I'd put it to you this way. The problem, I think, is people really wanting something very good, a certain kind of life in their home, I'd say especially in their relationships, in their family, with their neighbors, whatever stage they are in life. They want to have a certain rich kind of life that they're running into trouble of finding it difficult to do, and sometimes for not clear reasons. Right? And I'm not going to dump on the world in which we live has many wonderful aspects, but then again, I'm going to be kind of straightforward. I think that in many ways, major currents of the society in which we live are kind of undermining our ability to live, especially the kind of relationships and the kind of rich life, especially in our homes, that we so naturally crave. And so people have a sense that, hey, it's not going the way I'd like it to go here. I'd like to be doing something different. A lot of young parents, a lot of older parents, a lot of new grandparents, a lot of people looking towards marriage who they see trouble either on the horizon or it's on the waves that are crashing up against the ship right now. And it just so happens in the world that I have moved in, I've had a lot of opportunity as a philosophy professor to read some great thinkers, a lot of very wise people, get a lot of great principles about the good life. I know that sounds trite, but honestly, from being in the classroom and really rolling up my sleeves and working on it and talking about things like friendship and family and community, good work and leisure, I've really had the opportunity to see good philosophy makes a huge difference for people. And so the problem was they need principles. People need kind of the principles to give them some guidance and to give them some encouragement that they can find that kind of life that they're struggling to find.
So the problem is that people no longer know how to live the good life.
Yes.
You say that they've somehow been cut off from the transmission of the information and principles and wisdom that once sort of told you what that was?
Yes, well, exactly. Thank you for saying it so briefly. Let me give you a quick example, Jeremy. I think one of the big problems we have is just, particularly with so many of the technological practices that have become so standard for us, to just live in the presence of people. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's so huge. Life is so much about living together, living in the real presence of one another, in the bodily presence. This is being threatened. We don't need to go on a little thing here about those young people, but frankly, it's true. Especially young people are finding that very difficult. They don't have the habits. They don't have the contexts where they've learned these basic, let's just call them life skills, life principles. And honestly, we're all struggling with that. And so in many ways, we have to go back to basics. We have to go back to very ordinary things, kind of rethink it and refocus.
What are the symptoms that you see? Like I imagine that most people, even at Christendom College, don't come up to you and say, I just don't quite know what the good life is, right? They don't even know that that's the question, that they're experiencing some unhappiness, some sort of symptoms that are reflective of a sort of deep existential unfulfillment. What would you say are the symptoms that you see? I mean, maybe you can even just elaborate more on like, what's it mean to not be present with somebody?
Yeah, well, good. Well, how about this? I'm going to kind of take both of those right together. It's relationships, Jeremy. It's relationships, and especially those that are most important in our life. You think of the song "Cats in the Cradle." This is not just some offbeat song. This is actually the life story of many, many people. Take it from the viewpoint of the guy in the song. He's growing up as a boy and a young man, and his dad is just too busy. But his dad is not a particularly bad man, but he's just too busy. I mean, and he really is too busy, and he doesn't get it. And he doesn't realize that, and he's not connecting with his son. And next thing you know, you got a bad relationship there. You got the loneliness, you got the unhappiness, and then it just goes on. The next thing you know, this guy that was too busy, now he's going into retirement. And he's starting to experience, hey, I'd like to have certain kind of relationships. You know, how many people moving into retirement, they just aren't buying what so much society is trying to sell us of those golden years where you're going to look like the person up there on the billboard, playing tennis is just going to make it all absolutely perfect. Hey, I'm all for tennis, and I'm all for, doing a little water skiing, maybe, on the lake. But human happiness is fundamentally in these quality relationships, these rich relationships, well lived out. And these things don't happen by accident. We need to learn how to do them. We need to have context for doing them. But we steadfastly, as a society, are pretending as though those things are secondary, or as though they'll just kind of fall into place. And experience is showing they don't fall into place. They have to be prioritized, and if they're going to become what's so essential to our happiness. So
broken, weak relationships, or just non-existent relationships, are really the fundamental sort of sources of, or fundamental kind of symptoms.
They are. And I'd say especially with the people that matter most. And there, Jeremy, the people that we work with in the business world, it's very important. And some of our very, very good friends, of course, are going to be there. But I do think, I'm painting in broad strokes, and, fight me, push back. But sometimes you paint in broad strokes, and we get a little bit of a picture. I think one way of characterizing the challenge of today is that we've kind of forgotten about home. Home was always kind of the place where, well, we're most at home. But why are we most at home? Because it's a context for the most important relationships to really be lived out. But let's be honest. By and large, given our current practices, our homes have been eviscerated. We're doing hardly anything there. The kind of ordinary things that would have been done there, that would have been the context, that would have been the foundation, would have been the place that we're really living those closest relationships aren't there. That's kind of gone hand in hand with too often being overly invested in what I'm going to call, quote, career or profession. Not that obviously that's not very important. Right? And then it turns into a bit of a cycle, right? I mean, I talk to an awful lot of husbands kind of once they're starting to feel that alienation factor. At home, it's just kind of hard to connect, and it's a little easier for them maybe to connect at work. Whoop, now you got kind of a vicious cycle going. And it's taken them away from the things that in their own heart they feel the most important, but they're not sure what to do about it.
So home becoming just a place to sleep and recharge our devices is sort of the challenge we have here. Everything meaningful or productive has been outsourced from the home to other institutions.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this is not new. I mean, this particular complaint has been around for a couple of generations now. I mean, I think some of our listeners will know a book by Christopher Lasch called Haven in a Heartless World that was kind of about this problem, if I'm recalling it correctly, and many others have talked about it. It's just sort of like a compiling effect, like this it's sort of chickens are finally really coming home to roost now after a couple of generations.
It's hilarious, Jeremy, because that was literally the book that I was almost going to just quote here to you, with the brilliant assertion that the outsourcing of production led ultimately to the outsourcing of reproduction. It's a very powerful argument. We removed the work from the home. And once you remove work from the home, then you've removed kind of the backbone. So now there's not much for the children and the parents to do together. And so more and more they're raising the children. Likewise is going to be done outside the home. So the two things that had so much been going on there have been, as you said, outsourced. And so, yes, I think, Jeremy, the chickens are coming home to roost, but let's go positive here. I see, and this is what has absolutely inspired me in what I'm doing. I see many people, and we go back to what was the problem. Many people have a sense of a problem and they're looking for answers. They realize that they want something different. And you can see this all over the place in a lot of different ways. One of my favorite authors on this is Wendell Berry. One way that Wendell Berry puts it, as I think you know, Jeremy, is he speaks in terms of connections. All right. And we have become so disconnected. We've become disconnected from our own body. We've become disconnected from our neighbors. We've become disconnected from our family. We've become disconnected from the earth. And so how do we try to reestablish these connections? I think this is such a powerful, powerful theme. Home is the place where these most foundational connections are most natural. It's where we should find it most straightforward to connect kind of with our bodies. In the simple things of eating, for instance, or connect with the earth, because this little corner of the world is where we are going to be. If the environmentalists are telling us we need to take care of the earth, whatever, there's a great message in there. We do need to take care of the earth. Most importantly, starting in our backyard, because that's the part of the earth that I have a direct connection with, or I should experience a connection with. So I love this. I love this kind of theme of people are feeling disconnected, and you can see now how they're looking to be reconnected. Right now, the slow food movement, they kind of back to find your farmer and kind of support him and connect with him. Many ways that we're seeking to reconnect with our bodies, because our digital paradigm has tended to remove us from our bodies. So people are realizing we need to think in terms of ways of turning it off. So I think these are very hopeful signs. We just need to really plug in and be serious and get intentional about it.
Well, this is what's so interesting to me about what you're doing. I mean, you and I both know collectively, I'd say at least 200 people who are very good at diagnosing the problems and are very, very bad at proposing solutions and certainly working towards them in a practical way. So that's what's really interesting about Lifecraft. You're not only a thinker, but a doer in the givers, doers, and thinkers paradigm we have here. So let's get down to some more specifics then. There are sort of 4 areas, if I'm correct about this, where Lifecraft provides practical advice and wisdom. And those 4 areas are friendship, work, stewardship, and being a man. I want to ask you why a man, maybe just because you're a man, John. Maybe Sophia covers the being a woman part. But let's go through each of those like one at a time, if you don't mind. And we'll start with friendship. You've written a book about it. I know you've thought deeply about this in the context of your study of philosophy. I know Aristotle and Thomas in particular, Thomas Aquinas, that is very important to you. What stands in the way of our ability to form lasting and deep friendships today?
Great question. How about this? I'm going to first say why I'm so absolutely intent upon it, because the only way that I'm ever going to be the man, the person that I'm supposed to be is going to be through the help of friends. And so I absolutely just start with this conviction. We kind of know that implicitly, but I don't think we tend to act that way. And a lot of what's on the airwaves around us, we hear friends, relationships, connection. We don't really here emphasized, no, you need to go deeper, especially with a few people. In general, we're pushed to kind of be connected with everybody, but go deeper with few. But the great tradition on friendship is you've got to go deeper with a very small number of people. You have genuine relationships of some kind with those others, but at the kind of the center of your life, what really chisels who you are is a deeper kind of relationship with few. So to answer your with a few, so to answer what's keeping us from it, there's a lot of different approaches. Just I'm going to say, we don't have the context to go deeper. We're too busy. We're too often communicating with too many people on too many devices on the run, not having the opportunity to sit down and really have meals together, have a rich kind of work together, have a rich kind of leisure together, which is the kind of activities that friendships need to grow. How many men are there and women, Jeremy, that got a lot of acquaintances? Sure, there's plenty of people they'll call their friends. I love to say to my students, and it often stops them in their tracks. I say, and these are the young people. I say, look, really, how many people really know you? How many people really, really know you and care for you in addition to knowing you? Care for you and know you in such a way that they can really speak into your life, really, for instance, hold you accountable. This is an incredibly rare thing that shouldn't be so rare because it's so important for human life. So we've lost those habits.
I buy the premise. I buy the premise. So yeah, where do you start when you're instructing people, and how do you start to form truly deep friendships?
Jeremy, you know what I say? Look, you got to start. We start here. Start today. Start wherever you are, and you got to know what you're looking for. And in any case, so you have to start to have some conception of what a real friendship looks like, and then start to be discerning about with whom can you do that. That's what so many people shy away from this. They think that this is being overly judgmental, prejudiced. Well, can't you just be friends with anybody? And the reality is, this is one of the real sticking points. But this is where Aristotle
comes in. So go ahead and go down that one.
Aristotle is going to say you are only capable of real friendship to the extent that you have good moral character. It's just such a showstopper, and it's just so obviously true in experience. And so I need to look at myself. The first question is, am I the kind of person that someone really would want to be friends with? Am I really the kind of person that's capable of rolling up my sleeves and helping someone else become himself? Right? And this is where it's so much about character and being able to enter into real, honest, humble conversation where we do self-examination. Well, aren't the other aspects of having fun together important? Of course, those are the obvious things, but those are the things that do not make it a rich, deeper friendship. Those are things that take on a richness because of these other aspects of connecting on the deeper principles, the deeper convictions of life that we look to share and help one another, growing in character together. So we set that as a resolution for ourselves and look for other people who are willing to do that with us. And then we set forth on the project, Jeremy.
Does this sort of thing in your mind sort of need to be intentional? Did you go around like, hey, I'm going to create a truly deep friendship with this person, and I need to therefore dive into certain topics or a level of conversation that I wouldn't otherwise do? That's the first question. The second question is, how important is alcohol for men to be able to reach that level of conversation?
Okay. All right. So the first question, which is much easier, is you don't have to always. There's obviously a way that one could be kind of overly intentional, overly hyper about it. But you asked the right question, though, Jeremy. Because honestly, particularly today, where it doesn't come so naturally to us, in so many ways, men especially find it hard to figure out, real ways to be together apart from the kind of most obvious, more slightly phony, masculine things that they do together. The biggest thing is, I just say, Jeremy, people need to have friendship be a category they think about. It needs to be a category that you're, in a sense, it's always hovering in the back of your mind. And it doesn't get in the way, but it's a prism through which you learn to relate better to people and to be realistic. I love to say to people, never pretend to have a deeper relationship than you do. Another word of wisdom. Now, this is a medieval, the great Saint Alred on friendship. He says, actually, Aristotle said it too. The desire for friendship arises quickly. Friendship itself does not. So we have to be patient. You have to take the long haul. You have to have the deep cultivation, like all most important things. But again, that runs contrary to the grain today. So we have to be patient. Maybe and then, of course, your second question was, obviously there has to be beer. So go ahead.
Obviously, I'm kind kind of joking, but kind of not, right? Like the deepest and best conversations you'll have with somebody you really regard as a true friend or someone who could become a true friend. For at least for, I think, I'm sure maybe it's the case for women too. I can't speak to their experience. I can speak to the male experience or my experience. A glass or two of bourbon helps you get rid of some of the inhibitions that might be there for you to enter that level of conversation.
It does, Jeremy. And I hope I'm not going to sound prudish to say what I'm about to say, but perhaps it goes without saying. And on the flip side, the guy that you just never know whether he's going to go too far, you're not going to have good conversations with him. This is one of those areas of life where the great virtue of moderation or temperance allows you to enjoy the gifts for what they really are and allows you to be a real man by knowing the appropriate limits and receiving the gifts of alcohol as something that really can raise your hearts together. But at the same time, it, not done rightly, not done in a virtuous way, is going to kill the very thing you wanted to have.
Yeah, you want to stop before you get into the brawl.
Exactly.
Possible. It dampens friendship. All right. Well, look, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back with John Cuddeback, founder of Lifecraft, and talk about work, stewardship, and being a man. We're going to stay on this theme and then get into maybe some of the particulars of what you teach people to do at Lifecraft. We'll be right back with John Cuddeback.
Hey folks, I'm Jack Fowler, the author of Civil Thoughts. That's the free weekly email newsletter for the Center for Civil Society at AMPHIL, where we try to strengthen civil society. Civil Thoughts gives you a dozen plus recommended readings. Here's a link. Here's an excerpt of important articles and essays that I've come across in the previous week. I think anyone who's intelligent, dear intelligent American, that you will like it. So how do you get Civil Thoughts? Well, you go to civilthoughts.com, sign up. Trust me, it's totally free, risk-free. We're not selling your name to anybody. You'll enjoy it. civilthoughts.com.
All right, we are back with John Cuddeback, the founder of Lifecraft, and we had just been talking about friendship as one of the areas in which you provide, and for lack of a better term, like instruction, like how to help you how to learn how to become a better friend or how to develop true and genuine friendships. Let's move on to work. What do you see as sort of our major challenges when it comes to work in this world today, John? Yeah,
gosh, Jeremy, I'm just going to be really provocative. I'm going to put it to you this way. And it's a deeper conversation, but just as a starter here, I think we fundamentally tend to see work as something we get paid for rather than as a way of living together with people. And there's a lot going on there. And surely work is something that sometimes we should get paid for. But you know what? A lot of the most important work is something we wouldn't think of being paid for. But the notion of work, I think too much has been reduced to what we do in our profession and our being successful by being paid, say, a certain amount for doing it, versus, a la Wendell Berry, work as the kind of language of how humans forge a life together. Go back to the home, go back to the household, because it's always the place that human nature is so calling out to us that this is this great gift. This is the place where we especially discover and see who we are. In the household we grow up in the household perhaps that we are called upon to form. At the center of what living together in a household used to be was a whole set of very ordinary kinds of works. I was just given a lecture in Kansas, and I just said to people, I said, just want you to picture something. Just go back a few generations. Those ancestors of yours, nobody works harder than them. No one today is a harder, more responsible worker than they were. But their life was not hectic. There was focus. There was kind of a center. There's real presence and there's importance of relationship. They knew who they are. They belonged. Their life was not frenetic. Think about the work that it's just so interesting to think about the kind of work. I mean, kind of the main kind of works that they were doing together with their loved ones was the kind of the ordinary language of how they lived their life together. So Jeremy, where I'm pushing with this here is work out there in the profession is extremely important. And right now it's not my focus. My focus here is we need to build certain kinds of work into our home. So I'll tell you this much from my experience. It's one of the main things children are craving because it's one of the main ways children connect with their parents is by being invited into the work of life every day with them.
So what kinds of work are you talking about? I mean, I can imagine some listeners like, my subdivision doesn't allow chickens, so that's not going to work, right? I mean, I'm sort of joking about that, but that is one thing that obviously many people have taken up as sort of a way to bring some level of even symbolic productivity to the home, something that children can be involved in as well. What do you have in mind, though, when you're talking?
I'm going to be super practical. You said you were eventually going to ask me, so I'll kind of do two birds, start with one stone here. What do we like to do at Lifecraft? Really encourage you to revitalize your home by being very practical and concrete about building back into your home certain kinds of work. And each home needs to discern that wherever you are. And I'd like to make suggestions. And one author of mine, favorites of mine, in the 1930s, he was an agrarian, and he just said one of the things that we're losing are the ordinary functions of human life. And many of the ordinary functions of human life are things like growing food. But apart from growing, that's why you rightly mentioned the chickens. But set that aside for a moment. Making meals. The work in a household, at least one thing we're always going to need to do is eat. And look, I appreciate just as much as the next person being able to order in a dinner sometimes. But I do say, honestly, in the name of the richness and depth of a shared life in the home, to be kind of intentional and think about, the work that we can be doing together, that we're giving up as though it were something that is just a waste of time. Can we just get around this and get to the good food? We have missed the ordinary functions that actually are a gift. Making food together and the work that goes to sitting down at a table and eating and then cleaning up afterwards, that's a bit of work, and it's worthwhile work, particularly if we're invested in it together. It's a simple example, but something in all of our reach.
The work of education, is that another suggestion you would have for certain families?
It absolutely is, although that doesn't necessarily have to mean homeschooling. There is a certain work that we should be thinking about of what's involved in disciplining our children. But honestly, Jeremy, that's where I like to challenge people. You can't just, if you want to think about forming children real fast, you don't wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to form the children today, so let's just start forming. I'm going to discipline them, so I'm going to right now just kind of say, do this or don't do that. Work is the natural context where you teach responsibility. So finding these works is precisely the way that you're going to be doing also the deeper work of forming their soul. But as bodily beings, that's these kind of simple exterior ones, building things together, building things out. I mean, any of the old crafts, doesn't have to be some from the earth. Painting, absolutely. I mean, mechanics, these simple things, we're losing our ability. You see this especially in young men. They're losing the ability to do things with their hands, and they feel it. They feel less competent. I just wrote a piece on sewing, as I think something that is a basic skill important for both men and women. We so easily look down our nose on it. This is something classically that men and women were formed, and it gives you that sense of competence. These simple things. It's a structure of life together.
And I hope my wife doesn't listen to this podcast. Trying to get me to learn to sew for a while, John. So she's very good at it herself.
Not all of these are for everybody, so we're going to be all right.
I am that guy who's terrible with my hands, but I'm not hopefully the prototype. All right, let's move to stewardship. Although I could keep talking to you about work for a long time, and friendship for that matter, but stewardship. How is this idea different from environmentalism, if it is different at all?
A good question. And of course, I don't want to paint with too broad a stroke in what we call environmentalism, right? Many of us immediately think of maybe some particular positions there. And I want to be careful on that because I'm not going to show too many of my cards here, but I'm all for a certain kind of environmentalism and I'm not all for another. right? And the kind of environmentalism that would just undermine being able to meaningfully take resources from the earth. I think there's a kind of environmentalism that doesn't realize the kind of primacy of human life. It seems to me that ancients, religious and non-religious, saw clearly, I think, an important truth that there's a kind of hierarchy, and that doesn't mean that we treat the lower things in badly. What it actually means is given that by a natural ordering, you could say a divine providence, that lower things serve the life of higher things. That's a reason to take good care of them, but we have a responsibility to take care of them, but ultimately so that we can use them for higher ends well. So I think a mistake some environmentalism can make is to kind of not see the human difference, and that's a big problem. But
what you're just giving there is essentially sort of a definition of stewardship.
It is. It is. No, exactly. And I think this is why I think the good philosophical tradition it has the principles for the kind of environmentalism that could gather very strong support, and that begins in the home, because it is fundamentally a matter of stewardship, a matter of seeing the earth is a gift to us. The resources, the living things, the plants and the animals, they are a gift. And they must be treated as a gift, and they must be well cared for, both for the sake of ourselves and for the sake of the next generation. This is just appropriate. Human life, always with generosity, looks to those to come next. And so we build in that beautiful kind of spiritual significance of generously looking to others and thinking of them. I mean, it's like that great image in Homer of Odysseus' father as a very old man planting the tree. Right? This is such an important image of an old man planting a young tree, because this will serve the needs of those who come after me. Their stewardship. There's a beautiful image of it in that. And so what I'm calling stewardship there, Jeremy, is a big gift that fits together to the other things that we've been talking about, and especially here with good work, stewarding. And again, even if you're in an apartment, I do think, especially in this day and age, call me crazy, go ahead. I think some kind of connection with the earth, some kind of connection with growing things always has a unique place, even if it's just that basil plant on your patio. To be able to receive the gift of putting seeds in the ground, taking care and fruitfulness. There's a deep magic there. There's a deep wisdom that speaks to us, that teaches us to look beyond ourselves, to recognize a natural order when we observe that order, when we have the humility to realize we can't just make it all be exactly as we wanted it. We have to follow a natural pattern. These are fundamental life lessons that are being learned, that are being taught by the simple forms of stewardship, especially in a home, beginning with, even if you're not growing things, I mean, it's raking leaves. Honestly, how you think about whether we poison things or not just walking into the box store and buying the things they're trying to sell us without asking about how is this going to affect people's health and the animals and my neighbors. These are all very simple things that I think are more important than we recognize.
And do you have in mind, under the banner of stewardship, forms and patterns of consumption?
Yes. Well said. Thank you for bringing that out. Reasonable questions about, for instance, the great ancient category of asking more, what do I need than what do I want? And need can be taken in a rich way. And this is not in a scrupulous way, but a sense of not being wasteful. Again, not of scrupulosity, but of thinking what's appropriate. And again, there's always going to be different levels of wealth, but nonetheless, always having that in our mind. This was a gift given to all of us. How much of this are we using? How much are we returning? Are we taking reasonable steps that don't let people who go too far and don't articulate this well have you and me miss the gift that should be for us?
All right, John, we'll move on to the fourth category, the fourth lifecraft area, being a man. Why is that the fourth area? Like, how do you understand the problem there? What is it you're trying to confront?
So here's the thing, and it's a little bit more specific, although it is, and it's more what I call being a man of the household. The fundamental pattern, ultimately for all men, is in the pattern of a home and a household, and being a kind of husband and a father, even if not are all called to marriage, even if not all have children. Like, there's a sense in which all men, a very important sense, are called to be fatherly. And the pattern of fatherhood is very much a pattern of a man recognizing his unique place in the household. So I put it to you this way, Jeremy, and this is where I think it's bringing out something that has been hidden from us. In many ways, you could even say kind of taken away from us. So much more of who we are as men, so much more of our identity should be connected to what I'm called to do in my home. As opposed to, and this is not saying I'm not called to do very important things out there in the business and professional realm and serving the broader society. But it's reminding men of this, the kind of foundation. If, let's just say, first of all, if I am married, my first responsibility is to my wife. How am I as a husband? I think this question is not made thematic enough for us. And so the idea here of man of a household is go back to those very basic things. Put it this way, Jeremy, like, let's think of our funeral. What do we want to be said about us at our funeral? It's especially, we'd like to have said about us if we're married and then if we're blessed with children. He was a good husband. He was a good father. He prioritized these relationships. So being a man of the household to me is knowing what relationships to prioritize and then how to unfold that. And Jeremy, I think that connects with all the other things. Being a man in the household involves having good friendships, starting with the friendships right in the home. It means cultivating good work in the home because that's one of the main ways I'm going to connect with these people. That connects also to the stewardship also, because that's one of the ways also I'm going to express my manhood and be able to do that in a way that's serving other people. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm wondering if you have encountered, there's a certain sort of, I would say, almost comical figure that has arisen in recent years. And it's the young man, the sort of, you probably be called in certain circles, the tratty young man who has overcorrected, shall we say, and become really, and maybe usually this is more intellectualized, but just basically become sort of a sexist pig. Have you encountered this character?
Yes. Yeah.
I know a number of young women who've encountered him and have complained about this character.
I have. Well, let me say something about that. If there's one thing that marriage has taught me, Jeremy, it's that it's in marriage and trying to be what I'm going to call here the man of the household that I've had to learn. And I've had the opportunity to learn what the true gift of woman is and how wrong all of the shallow wrong biases, all of the selfishness, how being a man of the household done rightly gives me an opportunity to discover my life as a man is about loving and serving them. And I say to you in all earnestness, I know the proof is going to be in the pudding, Jeremy, but I know what you're saying about the young women who bump into these, quote, tratty guys who are just a problem. They're a menace. The man of the household that I'm talking about, I'm not trying to be funny. It's the guy that every woman is dying to meet because he has his priorities straight.
I wanted to make sure I gave you the chance to make that clear distinction. But it is a character. Actually, it's something I haven't really heard a lot about sort of in mainstream places, but it's a real problem. And I'm sure what you're doing will help sort of correct for that. All right, what are you most surprised? Here's a question for you. People got life crap on this. So you offer courses, you have online stuff, you have in-person events, and you just had a big event. Our producer, Katie Janis, told me. When people come to these things, they come to you, they're involved in these events. What are you most surprised that people want to know or don't know?
Gosh, a couple things surprised me. And I'm just going to go super positive. I'm surprised at the passion and the focus on trying to figure out how to do something different. And then I'm surprised often at how incredibly grateful people are to just hear a clear articulation of what many, particularly maybe some of our older listeners, would have thought, this is really obvious. This is just common sense, about teaching responsibility and teaching. The one thing I love to talk about is the importance of manners. Right. I just gave a presentation on our digital habits and how we've changed our manners to fit our digital habits. And this is a catastrophe. Young people don't know how to look people in the eye. They don't know how to introduce themselves, which is a big problem when it comes to real conversations. And real conversations are critical for any meaningful relationship. And so they have a big fat problem beginning in them not having manners. And you sometimes point this out, but you don't point out in a negative and carping way. And people are just like, hallelujah, of course. This is what we want. With these things have been taken away from us. And so it's the enthusiasm for going back to kind of basic things and their willingness to be kind of encouraged. And then they just want to get in the weeds and say, well, how do you do this? How do you recommend doing this? They want very concrete, specific things. And that's what you're saying. They don't just want to be told that they're children and that they have a problem. They want to just be given. And that's my whole thing. Hey, wherever we are, we can be doing better. Let's just start in particular areas of our life, and we're going to get more intentional about it. And we're going to ask the Lord to help us, and we're going to do something better here.
To your point about the sort of almost a timidity that seems to be a little bit more present among very young people. At Halloween, my wife and I noticed a number of trick-or-treaters coming to our door, and this had never happened before. But kids, I'm saying anywhere from 8 to 13, would come up on the porch and just stand there. They wouldn't knock on the door. They wouldn't ring the doorbell. They just stood there hoping you would see them from the window. Like, what is going on here? This happened over and over again. There is a certain kind of, I know that's tangential to your point about manners, but it's one of the points I make over and over on this podcast, the sort of risk aversion and timidity that is sort of grown by leaps and bounds among in their younger generations, that it's going to be a real challenge for them. It's something definitely to try to overcome.
It is. Focusing on the deeper things of life is what gives people courage. I mean, real courage.
Well, actually, you're getting to the source of it. I think you're exactly right. If you, if everything is all shallow, in the shallows all the time, you will be anxious and not courageous.
We have so much to be grateful for. We have so much to be hopeful about. At one and the same time, we need to recognize we have some very, very big problems. They're going to take dramatic, thoughtful approach to address, but to never be discouraged or to give up hope. And that's why I especially just like to, everybody has a home. Start in your own home. I don't care if you're a household of 1, you're a household of 2, you're a household of 7 or 10. Start there, live with dignity, have good work, have good leisure, exercise hospitality. Talk about a lost art. There's so much of what we're talking about here is in the work of hospitality. What a place just to begin again of the simple richness that can be going on in our homes.
Amen. Well, John, how can people get involved with LifeCraft?
Life-craft.org. And everything's free, Jeremy. Everything is free.
I didn't realize that. That's pretty good.
I'm a 501c3. So I do accept donations, and then people that really benefit, I just say, hey, can you give some donations here? But I don't ever want that to come in the way. And because I'm convinced that so many people want to hear this, they're going to benefit from them. So I just simply make it free. And I know people will support it. So come and take the courses. Man of the Household, they're on demand. They're right there all the time. Dinner at home. Become a read aloud leader in your home. It's the simple stuff. How to spend Sunday in the rich way that you'd like your Sundays to be.
I thought Sunday was all about being anxious about Monday, John. That's my own experience of Sunday, at least when it gets to be about 3 or 4 o'clock.
Jeremy, I've got a video for you, man.
Seriously, I'm one of your patients, Dr. Cuddeback. I need your help.
We're all in this together. We're going to go back to these basic things. So come, you can join, be a free member, get in there and be able to go in there and take those courses. And we have in-person things as online reading groups to give people the opportunity to read those stories that are going to enrich their lives. And then I want them to turn around and be reading out loud in their own home, because reading aloud is something spouses should be doing, parents with children. So the simple things like this, I want to give you the resources to do, and the resources are there.
My wife and I have Reading Monday coming up this evening, John, where it's no TVs, no devices. It's reading.
There we go. Way to go.
So that's my own contribution. I give that to you in LifeCraft to take it and do with it as you wish.
I'm going to use it as an example.
I love it. Life-crafts.org. It's the most practical application of Aristotelian philosophy, essentially. Not that anybody needs to care about that, but that's in many ways what it is that I've ever seen. So it's really wonderful what you've built, John. I wish you all the best with it.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Jeremy. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being with us. John Cuddeback, Lifecraft. Check it out. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, we invite you to subscribe and or rate and review this discussion on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to our podcasts. And have a guest you'd like to hear from? Send your request to our producer, Katie Janis, at kjanis@amphil.com. That's KJANUS@amphil.com.